This will be the video of my analysis of my draft in the Game Show Network Draft League Season 7 in the Johto flight of my team, the Sydney Piplups, coached by me. Yeah, I'm not good at this game. I mean, I'm probably better than I was last time, hopefully. This is the same draft league as the one that I entered and made an analysis video of my draft of last time, but there are a few differences from that last time. So the main differences between Season 6 and Season 7 for me is the actual difference is that I'm in a different flight. Since the way that the league works, if you place top 2 in your flight, you move up to the one above, and if you place bottom 2, you move to the one below. Unless you're in the top flight and place top 2, or the bottom flight and place bottom 2, because there's nowhere to go then. But since I placed second in Season 6 in Hoenn, I'm moving up to Johto, so that's very cool. Then in terms of things that I'm doing, which are different, is that I'm trying to draft mons which I haven't used before specifically, and ones that I'm very curious to try out. And I also have a plan of what I'm going to draft so that I don't end up doing something stupid like last time when I took Starmie despite already having Slowking, which was probably not the smartest thing I could have done. And it'll also probably make me more annoyed if I ever get sniped. Oh, and I'm also recording the video during the draft instead of like 2 weeks after, because I want to be on time with the release of the video. Still might not end up happening, but I can always dream, I guess. Oh, but I don't remember what happened last season. It's okay, because lucky for you, you get to have my lowest quality production, very good reenactment of what happened to me last season. It's terrible, but here you go. Okay, enough of that nonsense. Now we're on to the actual part of the video where I talk about what the video is meant to be about, which is my draft. On the screen right now should be the draft order. As you can see, I'm 12th out of 12, which means I am dead last, which would be absolutely horrendous if it wasn't a snake draft, but since it is, that means that I get my round 1 and 2 picks, and then my 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, and if I get to them and decide to go ahead with them, 11 and 12 picks back to back, which means I can have uninterrupted 2-mon cores, which no other place except first pick can have. So this means that like I can't be sniped if I draft something and it really needs to go with something else, then I can draft them at the same time and guarantee no one else gets the second half of the core. Like an example is if you really wanted, say, I don't know, Pelipper and Mega Swampert, but there's another rain team and you think they're gonna take one of those mons. If you were, say, like 9th pick and they were 11th, you could pick, say, Pelipper, and then they could pick Mega Swampert, and then you can't get Swampert. But if you're 12th and they don't snipe you beforehand, obviously, then you can just get that core right off the bat. This doesn't really end up mattering too much for me. Like, I only really have one set of 2-mons which I think are really important to go together. The rest I think I can pretty much build the entire team around. But it's a nice spot in the draft in general. The most worrying thing being round 1 if I get sniped. But the thing is, I made 4 different plans for this draft of potential teams to draft just to cover for if my first pick gets picked. Like, I made one with an Iron Valiant first pick, I made one with the Garchomp first pick, I made one with a Palafin first pick, and one with a Shifu Rapid Strike first pick, I think. So let's go into what I actually ended up picking. So the first pick of our draft this season in the GNDL is Garchomp. Why did I pick Garchomp? Because out of the 4 drafts that I had planned, I could have gone with 3 of them, because the only one where my first pick had been taken round 1 was the Iron Valiant one, which makes sense. But this was just the plan that I liked the most. And Garchomp in general is just really good. Its stats are amazing. It has like a really good 102 speed tier, which beats out base 100, which is really nice since base 100 is very crowded. 130 attack means it hits really hard with Stab Earthquake, especially after its Sword Stances, and then it can boost its speed with things like Scale Shot. It has really good coverage and things like it has on the physical side it has like Stone Edge, Fire Fang, Poison Jab, Aqua Tail. On the special side it has Flamethrower and Surf. I don't really know why. I think it's because it's a dragon and it's a land shark, but that's very cool. It's also really got a very nice move pool defensively, with access to things like Toxic. I mean, everything gets Toxic since it's not Dex, but it also has Roar, Dragon Tail, it has Spikes, and Stealth Rock. Rough Skin is a really nice ability because it's just free chip on any physical attacker trying to damage us. It pairs really well with Rocky Helmet, especially if we're running a tank chomp. And also, in finals and regular season, last season of GNDL, I got absolutely destroyed by Garchomp. Garchomp is very good and really hard to deal with, assuming you don't have a Pokemon faster than it that knows Moonblast or Ice Beam. Unfortunately, it does have some issues, uh, which it really doesn't have that many issues. I guess the main one is its coverage. It can be kind of difficult for it to hit certain things like bulky fairy types, even though it does have Iron Head and Poison Jab if they have a good dual typing or just really good natural bulk. Iron Head and Poison Jab aren't super strong since they're not stab. So bulky fairies can wall it quite well. And also, obviously, it's cripplingly quad weak to ice, which is a big issue to overcome, but overall, Garchomp is an incredible round 1 Pokemon which is able to fulfill so many roles and do basically everything. It's really good, and I'm glad to have it on the team. My second pick, or I guess since I'm last in the draft, is more like the second half of my first block of picks, is Terra Ogerpon. Why? Basically, I think this is the best Terramon that is legal in this league. There are some other really good mons with Terra which are legal, like Glysaur, Thunderous Therian, stuff like that. But Ogerpon gets a free speed boost when it Terras, which is really broken. It is limited to only Terra Grass, which is an unfortunate downside, but it has base 120 attack and 110 speed already, so boosting its grass moves even more isn't even that bad because it just turns into like a massive nuke. Uh, the +1 speed also makes it super hard to revenge kill without a Pokemon with first impression, and it also means that a lot of the time I will be hopefully forcing some of my opponents to run choice scarves on Pokemon which they have, which are really fast and ordinarily faster than most of my team anyway, in order to just not get absolutely obliterated by Ogerpon. In terms of move pool, it has a ton of grass stab options as like Ivy Cudgel, Woodhammer, Hornleech. It also has like Seed Bomb and Petal Blizzard, but those are kind of useless because Hornleech heals, Woodhammer does a lot of damage, and Ivy Cudgel is just really reliable. It has better bulk than you'd expect for something which would seem like such a glass cannon. I guess it's a grass cannon since it's a grass type. Anyway, it also has good utility. It has access to spikes, spiky shield, synthesis. It can heal itself. Hornleech means it can heal itself more. In terms of negatives, it has little coverage. It only really has Stomping Tantrum, Knockoff, Play Rough, and Superpower. And especially flying types, it can't really do much to. And it normally does the same thing, which is just click physical moves and maybe spikes and sword stance some of the time. And my third pick overall, and my first pick in my second block of picks, is going to be Corviknight. Few reasons for this. Mainly, steel types are very important in draft because they have such ridiculous defensive profiles. Steel flying is a really good defensive typing, especially. And so I want to get a steel type early on, along with fairy types, because fairy types are also really good, but that's going to come up later. And Corviknight is probably not the most steel type like steel type, but it's still like very solid, obviously, and it is a steel type. I used Skarmory last season, and Corviknight is just Skarmory 2. Like, the main difference is it's just Skarmory, but without Stealth Rock and Spikes, and some other moves like Sword Stance and Draw Run, which are less relevant. It's mainly Rocks and Spikes, but it has U-Turn. About Corviknight specifically, it has Defog, which is really good. It has a control. It has Roost, so it has really good defense stats, especially on the physical side. It's also not too bulky on the special side if you invest a little bit. I mean, not too frail. Did I say not too bulky? I don't know what I said. Anyway, the point is, it's very bulky. It can heal itself with Roost. It's pretty slow, so we can get some nice slow pivots with U-Turn. It even has access to Iron Defense Body Press to not be as passive as it normally is. And you can even run like a full sweeper set with like Agility, Bulk Up, Power Trip, and then like probably the last move Roost, and have like Weakness Policy or something, and try and get a sweep with Power Trip in the right matchup. But it is unfortunately quite passive if you can't get up an Iron Defense to strengthen your body presses. A lot of the time, it just kind of ends up having to click Roost every like second or third turn. It almost always needs to run both Roost and U-Turn unless you're running like a Power Trip set. But overall, it's just good. Yeah, I hope it does as well as Skarmory did last season. I mean, Skarmory didn't really do that well last season, but did its job. So hopefully Corviknight also does that. So yeah, it's good to have Corviknight. Steel types are very good. My fourth pick overall, and the second half of my defensive core, along with Corviknight, is Primarina. Primarina's typing is really good. Like, Water Fairy is very good. All of the Water Fairy types are very good. I mean, there are only 3, but Tapu Fini, Primarina, and Azumarill are all really good. I went with Primarina because I've wanted to use Primarina for a really long time. Ever since I started Draft League, I've always thought that Primarina would be such a fun one to use since it hits so hard and it's like really bulky on the special side, which also makes it pair well with Corv since Corv is more a physically defensive one. Like I said, really strong base 126 special attack. It hits really hard with Moonblast, Hydro Pump, Surf, Sparkling Aria, whatever you want to run. It has Flip Turn, so it can be another nice slow pivot to get Ogerpon in safely. It has interesting abilities. Liquid Voice can be used to give yourself stab on Psychic Noise, especially, which is the main reason you would want to use Liquid Voice. Or if you wanted to have stab that could go through Substitute, if you really thought Substitute was coming. But it mainly just helps you get more damage out of your Psychic Noises in matchups where you won't really need the Psychic type coverage. And Torrent is just useful in general if you get to low HP, pairs well with like specifically EVing your Primarina to live a certain hit at under a quarter of its health, and then you could run Custap Berry or something to get off 2 really strong Torrent boosted hits. Its coverage is okay. It has like Ice Beam, Energy Ball, Psychic Noise, Hyper Voice, and then obviously it's Water and Fairy Stab. It also has access to Calm Mind, and Draining Kiss can make it really hard to take down once it has some Calm Mind boosts. Unfortunately, its physical defense is not too high, and its coverage, while pretty good, isn't super amazing, and it generally just doesn't have very much for especially defensive bonds, but it is a special attacker, so that's to be expected. And the most unfortunate thing about Primarina is that it's a bulky water, but it doesn't have reliable recovery. Its most reliable recovery moves are Draining Kiss and Rest, which are not the best moves to be relying on to heal yourself. And I've never actually used a Bulky Water which doesn't have reliable recovery, because I've used 4 Bulky Waters before. My first draft didn't have one. Uh, but the 4 that I... Oh, wait, no, it did, but it was Piplups, so it doesn't really count. But the other ones that I've used are Empoleon, Slowking, and Alamamola. Alamamola has Wish and Regen, Slowking has Slack Off and Regen, and Empoleon has Roost. So I don't really know how well I'll do playing around Primarina not being able to heal itself, but I'm looking forward to using it, and I hope that it can put in work. For my 5th pick, I wanted to go back to a more offensive pace because I like playing hyper offense, and using hyper offense last time made me do a lot better than when I was using more defensive teams. So I decided to go with Azelf. Azelf is our fastest mon in terms of base speed. Obviously, Ogerpon's faster after terrestrializing because of the +1 speed boost. But at base 115 speed, Azelf is quite nice. It also has base 125 in both attack and special attack, so it can hit really hard, especially with its stab moves, and with its really wide offensive move pool, it can really dish out the damage with super effective hits. It also has access to some setup moves in Carmine and Nasty Plot, which can make it even harder to deal with. It lacks Bulk Up and Sword Stance, which I don't think Mesprit has Bulk Up, but I feel like I might have seen that somewhere before. Don't take my word for it, though. I'm probably wrong. Uh, Azelf also has really good support options. It has access to Stealth Rock, Thunder Wave, Encore, Dual Screens, Toxic. I mean, everything is Toxic, but my point is, its move pool is really deep, and that makes it very annoying to prep for because it could do pretty much anything. The main problems with Azelf is it's quite frail, and even though it has Levitate, which is pretty cool, its pure Psychic is not a very good defensive typing. It lacks any real resistances. Like, it resists Psychic and Fighting, obviously, but it's also weak to U-turn and knockoff, which is really bad. So it can often be hard for Azelf to get on the field without slow pivots, but since we have some great slow pivots in Corviknight and Primarina, I think that Azelf will really be able to do its job well and put in work for the team this season. And the 6th pick, going along with the more offense trend, is Terra Chandelure. Chandelure completes my Fire Water Grass core along with Ogerpon and Primarina, and basically it just hits really hard. It has base 145 special attack. Fire and Ghost is a very difficult stab combination to resist, and even if you do, it has access to NG Ball to smack waters, and it has Psychic, because why wouldn't it have Psychic? I think it also has Dark Pulse, but that's less relevant. It's a stab Shadow Ball. It's very difficult to switch into, especially when using specs. Scarf also makes it really hard to deal with because it patches up its somewhat subpar base 80 speed stat, and it still obviously has really high special attack. It has a really good ability for terrestrializing mons, which is Flash Fire, because turns out having an immunity on any type in the game is quite nice, and having an extra immunity on types which already have ones lets it defensively Terra quite easily. Like, Terra Bug is honestly a defensive Terra that it can use fine because of its like Earthquake resistance and fighting resistance. And since it has Flash Fire, you can kind of just ignore the fire weakness, and Flying and Rock are not super common types of moves that you have. Flash Fire obviously also makes Terra Steel and Terra Grass very good, as they're weak to fire, but Flash Fire gets rid of that. Terra Ice is also weak to fire, but like that's not a good defensive typing. But this isn't a defensive mon, so Terra Ice, Terra Blast can give it some coverage that it might need. It gets Will-O-Wisp, Haze, and Pain Split for some reason. I don't know why I get all these moves. I just standard ghost type stuff, I guess. And since it has Taunt, it can also make it like pretty good at stall breaking, and it can be a decent defensive mon itself, even though it has low HP, so it can't really take too many hits. It's not terrible. It's probably better off just as an offensive mon though. Like it really likes to use choice scarf and choice specs, scarf giving it speed and specs giving it ungodly levels of power comparable to Chi. But because of this, it really struggled with stealth rocks because it's weak to rock and it doesn't normally hold boots. Of course, it is a Terra Captain, but since I do have Ogre, there are not too many games where I can see myself terrestrializing Chandelure, but hopefully Chandelure will be able to just basically click buttons and start killing stuff, which is the whole point of a lot of this draft, I'm now realizing. For my 7th and 8th picks, I wanted a Ghost Resist since I've now drafted 2 Pokemon weak to Ghost and have 0 which resist it. I also wanted some more hazard removal to go along with Corviknight. Specifically, I wanted a Rapid Spinner because Corviknight's default gets rid of our hazards, and I have 2 Stealth Rockers and 2 Spikers on the team, so I think that hazards will be something that I will likely bring to a lot of games. Initially, what I wanted for my 7th pick was Cyclizar, but Cyclizar got sniped, so instead I picked up what I deemed to be the best budget Cyclizar after a grand 2 minutes of thinking, which was Cincino. Similar to Cyclizar, it has a lot of the things which I liked about Cyclizar, which is being a normal type, making it immune to Shadow Ball. It can clear hazards with Tidy Up, which unfortunately removes our hazards as well, so it's not quite as good as Cyclizar's Rapid Spin. Uh, it can be a really terrifying cleaner and wall breaker with a setup move which boosts its speed and attack in Tidy Up, while Cyclizar has Shift Gear. It has access to a fast U-turn and knockoff, and Technician, Tail Slap, Triple Axle, Bullet Seed, Rock Blast hit really hard. Cincino also has Thunderbolt, it and also Focus Blast. This is not relevant, even though it does have Calm Mind. It is like base 65 special attack, but it does get them, and I thought that was interesting. Unfortunately, Cincino obviously isn't a Cyclizar, so it doesn't have Regenerator, which is unfortunate. Rapid Spin, as I mentioned, it doesn't have Rapid Spin. It has Tidy Up, which while it can get rid of hazards, also gets rid of the hazards that we set up, which is not very good. Cincino is really frail, so even though in theory it can be an offensive monster after a Tidy Up, it's quite hard to actually get up a Tidy Up because Cincino takes so much damage from neutral hits. You basically can't switch it in, and some stronger mons will just OHKO it with neutral hits, which is really unfortunate as well. There was something else I was going to talk about Cincino, which I can't remember what it is now. Oh, right. It's the another reason I wanted Cyclizar was I wanted something faster than Azelf, like at base 120 or higher speed, as a nice top speed tier for the team, which Cyclizar had at 121, but Cincino didn't. Cincino is at the same speed as Azelf, but it's not faster, so that means that the fastest mod in our team is 115 unboosted, which is a little slow, but I think it's alright. And Cincino is honestly a pretty good replacement Cyclizar, and I'm pretty excited to use it actually. I've never used this thing before, but I have seen it murder a bunch of people in game, not in real life. That's not good. Similar to how I wanted Cyclizar for my 7th pick, I wanted Hisuian Quillfish for my 8th. And while unlike Cyclizar, Quillfish didn't get sniped. Since I picked Cincino instead of Cyclizar, which is 1 point cheaper, I decided to go 1 point higher with Quillfish and take its evolved form, Overquill. Overquill has a lot of good traits. It has Intimidate, which is really good. It also has Swift Swim, so you can do stuff with Rain Dance. It also has Poison Point, I think, that I'm never going to use Poison Point unless I really don't want to use Swift Swim or Intimidate because I'm against a Tracemon or something like that. It's only weak to ground. It's a very reliable spike setter with access to Taunt and Toxic Spikes as well. It can stop setup mons with Haze. It's a grounded poison itself, which means it can remove Toxic Spikes when switching into the field. it has access to Sword Stance and a pretty nice base 115 attack stat, which can make it quite a threat offensively. In terms of its stabs, Gunk Shot just hits really hard, Barb Barrage has a really high poison chance, Throat Chop can stop sound moves, which can be really useful against certain Pokemon, like Sylveon. It really shuts down Sylveon and forces it to run with the weaker Moonblast instead of picks like Hyper Voice, which is very nice. Overcall has access to Aqua Jet, which is a priority the team is sorely lacking because the only priority we have right now is Aqua Jet on Primarina, who has like base 60 attack or something, and Quick Attack on Ogerpon, which Ogerpon is already really fast, and Quick Attack is not stab, and generally probably a waste of move slot. Unfortunately for Overcall, its special defense is not that great, especially when compared to its unevolved form, which with an Eviolite is a lot bulkier than it actually. But Overcall is better offensively, and the freedom of holding any item is also quite nice. Then again, even though it has better offenses, Overcall does have an unfortunate stab combo, which isn't awful, but it's also not very good. And Liquidation is basically its only coverage move. But overall, I think Overcall will be a nice defensive piece and offensive piece. And Spiker. I did not set myself up well to end this, but oh well. Yeah, on to the next Pokemon now. For my final two picks, there were a few things that I wanted. Mainly, I wanted an Ice type and an Electric type because I like to have those types as they're quite nice offensively, and generally having like a fast, strong Electric is really cool, and Ice types just have very spammable stab in general. And I also wanted something to have a speed tier between Garchomp's 102 and Overcall's 85, preferably around like 95, so that my opponents don't just decide, I'll be slower than Garchomp, but save a ton of EVs, which they can invest somewhere else in bulk or offense or something, and only have to outspeed Overcall. And also to stop them from being able to run like plus attack or plus defense natures while still outrunning Overcall, when not having to worry about outrunning a Garchomp, which they're naturally slower than anyway. So my ninth pick is doing a few of these things, being an Ice type and having a base 95 speed tier. It's just a casual, round 9 Galarian Darmanitan. Nothing too crazy. It's Galarian Darmanitan. Darmanitan, it hits really hard. That's basically all it does. There's not much you can say about it. It has 140 attack, Guerrilla Tactics, gives it a Choice Band as an ability, so then you can give it a Choice Scarf to make it fast and stupidly strong, or a Choice Band so that it has an effective attack stat of, I'm pretty sure, it reaches to like above 900, which is pretty good. Ice Cold Crash is very spammable. Pretty much everything gets two-shot by it except for like physically defensive resists. Almost everything else will just die to 2. You can't really switch in on Darmanitan because it's just like that. Unfortunately, this does mean that you're locked into one move, which a lot of the time doesn't really matter because you're hitting so ridiculously hard, but it can be difficult against like thick, fat Pokemon or like bulky resists. It also has Zen mode, which, unlike regular Darmanitan, is actually useful because instead of getting slower and bulkier and becoming a special attacker, it just gets like 40 speed and 20 attack. So now it has 160 attack and 135 speed, and it gets a dual stab and fire, which is pretty cool, but it's not really that practical because Guerrilla Tactics is so broken and Zen mode is so unreliable. But yeah, Darmanitan, it hits hard, good at clicking buttons and killing stuff, and if I've learned anything from using Scarf Lele, locking myself into one move and clicking one button works pretty well. So I thought this would be a good second last pick. And for our final pick, I did say that I wanted an electric type, and initially I wanted a fast offensive electric type, but it turns out when you only have 2 points in a draft league to get your electric type, your options are very thin. the options for offensive electrics that I had, which weren't middle stages, because they're all somehow worse, were Plusle, Minun, Dedenne, and Morpeko. And the only other options were uh, Pachirisu and the one that I decided to go with, which is Ampharos. Ampharos is obviously well, not really obviously, but I think it's quite a bit better than every Pokemon I just named, except Morpeko. I think Morpeko is pretty good. Like, it offers Rapid Spin and Knockoff. That's decent for 2 points. But Ampharos has some good stuff. It is our only Pokemon that resists flying outside of Corviknight, which is good because most flying types can learn Heat Wave, and Corviknight is weak to Heat Wave. And it's also our only electric resistance, which doesn't get obliterated by a random HP Ice, which Ogerpon and Garchomp kind of just get destroyed. Ampharos is also pretty bulky. I mean, I think it has like 90 HP and like 85 defense and special defense, or around that, which isn't amazing, but it's also not terrible, especially since Pure Electric is a surprisingly good defensive typing. It really helps us against the flying type specifically. It can do some good stuff in a supporting role. It has access to dual screens, Dragon Tail, and Roar, Heal Bell. Its special attack is base 115, which is actually pretty good. Even though I'm likely to be using this more defensively most of the time, it can hit quite hard with investment. It also has some nice coverage with Dazzling Gleam, Focus Blast, Power Gem, Signal Beam, Electric Stab. It still has nothing for ground types, but that's a pretty common issue with electric types. And Volt Switch, combined with its base 55 speed, means it's a pretty cool slow pivot. Unfortunately, it's a Pokemon with no recovery outside of rest. It really can't hit ground types, and basically every other electric type is better than it. Uh, it, I mean, in terms of the ones I could have gotten, I think it's the best, and it really does have quite a bit of value. I think like it does more than you would think. It checks a lot of good Pokemon, like it checks Tornadus Therian, it checks Thundurus, it checks Kilowattrel. It checks every flying type which doesn't have a dual stab or a ground type move, which is pretty good. And it also checks most electric types which don't have a dual stab or a ground type move. So that's honestly really good value for a last pick. I'm really happy with Ampharos. I think it'll do me well. So that's all for the draft analysis. Just as a recap, my team is on the screen here. It's Garchomp, Terra Ogerpon, Terra Chandelure, Corviknight, Primarina, Azolf, Overqwil, Cincino, Galarian Darmanitan, and Ampharos. I'm quite happy with it, considering the fact that I did plan this beforehand. So I was actually trying to think of a way to make the draft pretty good. I like the very offensive take to it. I'm a little disappointed that I didn't get Cyclizar, but Cincino is also really good. I'm excited to use Cincino anyway. Lots of mons here which I've really wanted to use for a long time. I think that it's got a lot of threats, but there are like some things which I'm a little disappointed about and also worried about. Uh, One of those things is dealing with electric types and flying types, because while I do have Ampharos, it's basically like my only check to flying types, assuming they have Heat Wave, because if they have Heat Wave, then Corviknight just gets bodied. And another thing is that my Steel type is Corviknight, which while Corviknight is very good, it doesn't have access to Stealth Rock, which most Steel types do. And a lot of the time, it isn't really worth getting Steel type if you don't have access to rocks. Similarly, I'm a little annoyed about the hazard control. I'm not able to remove hazards without removing hazards that I turn on myself, which is annoying since Garchomp has rocks, Azolf has rocks, and Garchomp, Ogerpon, and Overqwil all have spikes. But overall, I think the team's quite good, and I'm really excited to use it and see how I do in the league. Bye.